Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we are looking at something pretty cool from Vosteed. This is the Corgi. Many of you will be aware of this and somewhat familiar, but I wanted to talk about this a little bit because it's doing some pretty interesting things. First of all, I think we have to admit the design is pretty cool. To get this fully symmetrical all around is really, really neat and a little impressive because they actually had to re-engineer the way this lock functions a little bit. And so Vosteed is calling this, it's a button lock, and it works much like most button locks, but they're calling this the Trek lock, and it is a slight variation. Okay. Not only that, but if you look at the blade here, notice, so you can see that portion of the blade, you can see that portion of the blade, now you can see that portion of the blade. Let me actually get a light going here. And there's the stop pin. Okay, so if you look at where the lock is, all right, and you look at where the stop pin is, as you deploy the knife, I want you to kind of think about what's going on internally here. So we have a fully enclosed, an internal stop pin combined though with an internal button lock, which is actually a pretty neat idea that I don't think I've seen happen before. So yeah, I'll show you. I don't know if you will notice a difference because it's quite a ways in there. Maybe. Let me try that one more time. We'll see if we can see the internal movement of the button lock. Okay, yeah, there we go. I think I got it. Had it. There we go. And all right, so kind of cool. We'll come back and talk about that in a minute, but I wanted to show you that right from the start because I suspect there'll be a few people out there who are curious about that. Now, apart from this, let's do a quick rundown on size and weight. So this knife is a little small for me, admittedly, 7 1/8 overall, 3-inch blade, 4 1/8 inches when closed. All right, 3 5/8 grip area, which is actually not bad. You know, I've often talked about my size large hands don't always fit every knife, but this one, it works out okay. All right. And with the micarta, now, the other thing I should say here is as you're looking at this, there are a bunch of variants of this. And in fact, I think they've recently even come out with a frag pattern variant of this knife. So there are a bunch of different options out there. In this version with the micarta and the stainless steel liners and painted blade, okay, only the micarta is really going to make a significant difference. But the weight on this guy is going to come in at a paltry, hold on, make sure it's zeroed, 3.33 ounces. All right. So pretty comfortable to carry around. Now, we kind of expect that on a knife that's a little on the smaller end of the spectrum. This is also a really fidgety knife. The only thing that I find I have trouble with in terms of the action, the detent is a teeny bit soft, but it's not terrible. All right, I can't, hold on, let me go off camera a little bit because I've tried this a couple times and not been able to do it, but if I go off camera and I give myself a lot of arm room, I can, yeah, there we go. I can even do it on camera. So I can get this to deploy. I'd like to see a slightly stiffer detent just to get that action a little bit snappier. All right. But otherwise, very smooth, very, very fidgety. But I do have one consistent issue, and that is this knife always wants to bounce out on me. I just cannot get the timing figured out. And I think it's just the blade to handle weight ratio. And I think it might also have something to do with the lock location. All right. Now, having said that, with a little bit of practice, I can sort of, you know, I've gotten better over time. And I think if I had this knife for a longer period of time, I'd eventually get really, really good at it. But I would like to see that detent stiffened up just a little bit. Otherwise, I have very few, like I don't, you know, this knife is too small for me, so it would never be a knife I would buy or own. But in terms of making a recommendation, other than that slightly soft detent, I don't really have any serious complaints. This is a really nice knife. And I have to say, from a design standpoint, this is really, really cool. You just don't see this kind of thing all the time. And I have to say, I'm a little bit in love with this design. It just is so clean and so minimalist. And just, yeah, really, really impressive job in that department. Let me carry on with a couple other things. We've talked about the action a fair bit. This one is micarta. The micarta is really nicely done. I love the color scheme that they've gone with here with the bronze and brown and black. Looks really, really great. All right. Notice that there is a spacer installed there for the reversible pocket clip. It's obviously right side tip up carry right now, and we've got that nice wow, flush fitting clip with flush screws as well. I just love that. Back spacer, bit of a little lanyard post right here. You can probably see that this is milled out to save a little bit of weight. I don't know how much, this is not going to be a super heavy knife to begin with, but it's nice to see them lighten that up even a little bit further. So that's a quick rundown of the handle and the construction. I love to see, there's just a little bit of extra effort undertaken here. Now that we've covered we're kind of getting into sort of construction aspects, let me talk about this lock just a little bit more. So if you could actually see internally on this part of the blade, okay, which is going to be down when the blade is deployed, you've got a track internal here, like you've often seen. If you've ever taken apart any number of locks that have an internal stop pin, or I mean, any number of knives with an internal stop pin, you've seen this before. But in this case, the sort of crescent shaped track that's in the blade that allows for the stop pin to move has a hole in it that fits that lock. So when it reaches, right, so right now the lock is moving in that track, okay, and as it gets to the top position, the lock pops through and locks open the knife. So kind of an interesting way of achieving this, right? This is something that we don't see all the time, and I have to say I'm pretty darn impressed with it. If you flip this over to this side, if you want to take this knife apart, all right, you're going to flip it over, you take the screw, and this little cover is holding the spring in place that moves this button. All right. Again, pretty neat. And I kind of suspect, although I don't know this for a fact, but I kind of suspect that the plate here, all right, and over on this side was to allow for enough room, right? Had you just, let's say, put this scale on and depended on the scale to cover the or to hold in the spring on the button, maybe there wasn't enough room there and they had to kind of gain a little excuse me, guys. Sorry about that. They had to gain a little bit of space, and they did that by using this cover. Otherwise, the other option was they were maybe trying to save themselves some milling, but you got to mill out a spot for this inset anyway. So I feel like this was just a simple solution by having that plate pop on. It just makes life a little bit easier in terms of construction when you're implementing that button lock. All right, so that gives you a quick rundown of sort of the features and the functions and most of the materials. We haven't touched on the blade too much yet. It is 14C28N, which is a great steel. Of course, we've got a black coated version here. There are various different blades not different blade steels, but there are for sure a satin finish or a stonewash finish, and then the black coated blade. As you guys know, I'm not always a fan of black coated blades. This isn't my knife anyway, so that doesn't really matter. But I do love this color scheme overall. And as an EDC knife, this is not something you're going to be pounding on and taking out into the forest and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like the likelihood of scratching that blade up is kind of diminished because of the kind of use that you're going to be putting this knife to. It is fairly thin behind the edge. It's thin blade stock as well, so pretty slicey there. It's Yeah, it's not as thin as some knives we've had on the channel before, but it's very good, and I think it's a nice balance, which, we've talked about this before, but for an EDC knife, I like to see kind of a balance carried off so that I'm not dealing with such a fine blade that I constantly have to worry about putting any kind of side-to-side forces on it. All right, let me go ahead. We've kind of covered most of the key stuff here, including size, weight, blade material, all that kind of stuff. 14C28N is a great blade material, and I'd love to see it a lot more. Let's go ahead, though. We haven't gotten any comparisons. Now, I only have one other Vosteed knife here, and that's the Nightshade, and that's because it's also visiting from Steve. That's Everyday Pocket Dumps. All right. I'm not a guy who owns a lot of these smaller sized knives. I do have a slip joint that's somewhat comparable. This is the Real Steel Luna. This is the Knife Nuts podcast exclusive. All right. But kind of a different thing. It's still kind of the design language or the design phase is kind of interesting. So sort of that cool EDC vibe that they're trying to achieve there. All right. I do have a number of button locks right now. This one is also from Steve. This is the Cubit from Civivi. Really, really like the Cubit. I probably I find the Cubit just a little more compelling than the Vosteed for some reason. I don't know what it is, but that's my own preference. But it is a similar size button lock knife. Now it lacks that cool innovation of the way that Vosteed carried that off, which I think is pretty cool. Let's see, similar sort of size-ish knife, a little more hand filling for me, but we've got the Manix 2 lockback. Of course, there are a bunch of Civivi button locks. I had I don't know what I've done with it. That's all right. We're going to have to skip it for today. Button Lock Elementum is, my Carta button lock, black blade, kind of similar vibe going there, but that's okay. We're going to have to compare it to the Sentinel Strike, which is, many, many times larger, but there are a bunch of good Civivi button locks out there. All right. If you want one thing that's, I haven't really thrown something in here that's familiar to everyone other than the Manix. So let's add the Para 2 as well. All right, there you go, guys. There are a few comparisons, some that are more for size and utility. I tried to throw in some knives that you're probably familiar with, and others are more, if you like this knife, what other options might you be interested in? But this is a pretty, I could see this design appealing to a lot of people, especially non-knife people. The other thing is, it's kind of a what would you say, almost a little bit cute, a very safe feeling knife. So if you're carrying in an office or around people who maybe, might not be into knives the way you and I are, this might be a good option for that as well, or even for a gift. I could see a lot of people liking this, who, again, if you got them something like this, they wouldn't be into it, but this is kind of classy and cool, and so maybe appealing to a broader audience. All right. Really cool design. It has a similar feel to some other sort of Quaken inspired knives, and that's kind of the nature of the beast. Any Quaken style knife is going to sort of feel a little bit like some of the others that are out there. I love the lock mechanism. I love the fully symmetrical design. That is really, really cool. I love the way this looks. Like, it doesn't even look like a knife. It's just really, really interesting. There's some Civivis that are, sort of dagger style, that kind of remind me of this, but this pulls it off a little bit nicer, I think, from a design standpoint. So there you go, guys. Those are my thoughts on the Vosteed Corgi. I totally get why this knife is pretty popular and why, if you go on Blade HQ right now, don't go there. Actually, go to White Mountain Knives, go to Blade Ops, go to DLT Trading. Use my link in the description box for any of those. Use my discount code Sharp Stuff if you're going to White Mountain Knives. But if you go to any of those retailers or even ones that have nothing to do with my channel, right? There's a bunch of variants of this, and they're even coming out with some new ones. And I wouldn't even be surprised if we saw this, in some upgraded steels and things like that. For now, I know there's a frag pattern handle, which is kind of interesting. So anyway, thought I'd throw that out there. You may be interested in some variation of this knife because there are a bunch of them. So go ahead and check it out. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.